My name is Rebecca. I'm 31 years old, and I'm going to tell you a story about how the people I trusted most in the world, my own family, tried to steal my identity, my dream, and everything I had built. What happened next was even worse than the initial betrayal, but it was also the moment I finally found my own strength. I want to share the full, painful truth of what I went through because maybe, just maybe, someone out there watching knows exactly what it feels like to have the people you love try to erase you. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you've ever felt excluded or betrayed by family, please hit that like button. It helps me know I'm not alone, and it helps this story reach others who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Growing up, my family dynamic was complicated. We weren't the picture-perfect family from a sitcom. There were undercurrents, unspoken rules, and a certain pecking order that was never explicitly stated, but everyone felt. My mother, Eleanor, was a force of nature in her own way, charismatic and charming when she wanted to be, but with a sharp edge and a tendency towards manipulation. My older brother, Daniel, was her golden child, effortlessly succeeding in everything he tried, or at least, that was the narrative we were all given. I was the quiet one, the observer, the one who preferred reading and creating things on my own rather than vying for attention. This dynamic meant I often felt overlooked, my achievements downplayed, my struggles minimized. It wasn't malicious, not always, but it built a foundation of feeling slightly less important within my own home. Despite this, I loved my family fiercely. I craved their approval, their warmth. I wanted to be part of their triumphs, and I wanted them to be part of mine. That's why, when I finally came up with an idea that I knew, deep down, was significant, my immediate instinct was to share it with them, to bring them in. The idea wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was the culmination of years of passion and learning. I had spent my 20s working in various roles within the sustainability sector, learning about renewable energy, waste reduction, and ethical sourcing. I saw a gap in the market, a way to connect small-scale, ethical producers directly with consumers in a way that hadn't been done before. It wasn't just a business, it was a mission. I pored over feasibility studies, built complex spreadsheets late into the night, mapped out supply chains, and developed a brand identity that felt authentic and true to the values I believed in. I had a name for it, a logo, a detailed plan. It was my baby. One evening, sitting around the dinner table, feeling a surge of excitement and perhaps a desperate need for validation, I decided to pitch it. I laid it all out, the market research, the unique selling proposition, the financial projections, even the marketing strategy. I spoke with a passion I rarely showed, my hands gesturing, my voice catching with enthusiasm. I watched their faces. My mother leaned forward, her eyes wide. Daniel listened intently, nodding occasionally. For the first time, I felt like I had their undivided attention, not because of some drama or family obligation, but because of something I had created, something I was genuinely proud of. Their reaction was overwhelmingly positive. My mother exclaimed about how brilliant it was, how I had such a good head on my shoulders. Daniel immediately started talking about scale, about venture capital, about leveraging his business contacts. They didn't just seem interested, they seemed excited. They talked about how we could do this, how we could make it happen, how our family could build something significant together. It felt incredible. All those years of feeling invisible, of my quiet pursuits being overlooked, seemed to melt away in that moment. They saw it. They saw me, or at least the potential of my idea. They offered to help. My mother had a knack for networking and public relations, smoothing ruffled feathers and charming investors. Daniel, with his business background, could handle the financial and legal complexities. It seemed like the perfect partnership, a true family venture where everyone brought their strengths to the table. I would be the visionary, the expert in the field, the one who built the core concept and maintained its ethical integrity. They would be the operational support, the public face, the financial navigators. It felt right. It felt like a dream come true, a chance to finally connect with my family on a deep, collaborative level. Looking back, I can see the tiny cracks that were there from the beginning, but at the time, I dismissed them. My mother would occasionally make comments like, "This is such a good idea, Rebecca, but it needs a bit more polish. Maybe I can handle the initial pitch materials? Or Daniel would say, the sustainability stuff is great, obviously, that's your wheelhouse, but let me handle the business plan summary for potential investors. It needs to sound professional. These comments, dressed up as helpful suggestions, were the first steps in subtly shifting control away from me. I, naive and trusting, agreed. Of course, I thought. They're helping. They have experience I don't. This is what a partnership looks like. We started working on it in earnest. Long evenings around the dining table were replaced by formal meetings in coffee shops or rented co-working spaces. Our initial excited discussions morphed into structured agendas and action items. I was still doing the bulk of the core work, researching suppliers, refining the ethical guidelines, developing the product lines, building the website content, creating the brand story. But they were handling the external-facing stuff, the important stuff, or so it seemed. My mother was the one reaching out to potential partners and investors, using her extensive social network. Daniel was consulting with lawyers and accountants, setting up the company's structure. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, my role started to feel different. I would prepare detailed reports on potential suppliers, outlining their ethical practices and quality standards, and submit them for review. My mother or Daniel would skim them, make a few perfunctory comments, and then move on to discussing meetings they had, contacts they had made, decisions they were considering regarding funding or legal structure. My input was still solicited, but it felt increasingly like a formality, a box to be checked before they proceeded with their own plans. There were small moments that chipped away at my confidence. I designed a crucial part of the user experience for the website, based on my research into conscious consumer behavior. I presented it excitedly. My mother frowned and said, I don't know, Rebecca. It feels a bit niche. Daniel, what do you think? Maybe we should go with something more standard, easier for people to understand. Daniel agreed, suggesting a simplified, less innovative approach that completely missed the point of what I was trying to achieve. I tried to explain the reasoning behind my design, the data supporting it, the user testing I'd already done on a small scale. They listened politely, then nodded and said, okay, well, we'll take it under advisement, which I quickly learned meant they would ignore it. Another time, I spent weeks drafting a comprehensive ethical sourcing policy, detailing everything from labor practices to environmental impact standards for our suppliers. It was the heart of the business, the promise we were making to our customers. I was incredibly proud of it. I shared it with them. My mother glanced through it and said, "This is very thorough, dear. Maybe a little too detailed? We don't want to bore people. Can't we just put something simple on the website about being ethical?" Daniel chimed in, "Yeah, Rebecca, we need to focus on marketability. We can worry about the nitty-gritty details later. Once we're established, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This wasn't just nitty-gritty. It was the entire raison d'etre of the business. They seemed to see it merely as a marketing angle, not a fundamental principle. Despite these moments, I pushed forward. I told myself they were just approaching it from a different perspective. They were the business experts, after all. I was the visionary, the product person. We needed both. I held on to the belief that their actions were ultimately for the good of our shared venture, our family business. The stakes grew higher. We were approaching the point where we needed to sign contracts with key suppliers, establish formal partnerships, and secure the initial round of funding. This required legal documents, binding agreements. We discussed setting up the company structure. I assumed we would be equal partners, perhaps with defined roles and ownership percentages reflecting our contributions. Mine primarily the intellectual property and initial concept. There's the capital and operational expertise. One afternoon, Daniel called me. "Hey, Rebecca," he said, his tone casual. "I've been working with the lawyer on the incorporation documents. Just wanted to give you a heads up on how we're structuring it." He proceeded to explain a corporate structure where he and my mother were listed as the primary directors and shareholders, with me being listed as a consultant. My breath hitched. A consultant? I repeated, the word feeling alien and wrong. "But it's my idea. I built all of this." "Well, yes, your idea is the foundation, obviously," Daniel said. a slight edge to his voice that wasn't usually there when he was being charming. But Mom and I are putting in the capital, and we're handling all the legal and financial stuff. That's the heavy lifting. A consultant role is perfect for you. You can focus on the creative side, the product development, without getting bogged down in the boring administrative details. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Boring administrative details? Daniel, this isn't just about creative side. I built the business model. I found the suppliers. I designed the ethical framework. This is my business. I should be a partner, a director. Rebecca, be reasonable, he said, his voice shifting to a tone he often used when he thought I was being overly emotional or irrational. Mom and I are taking on all the financial risk. You're contributing the concept, which is valuable, yes, but it's not the same as putting cash on the line and being legally responsible. The lawyer recommended this structure. It's cleaner. Cleaner for who? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. It sounds like it's cleaner for you to control everything and cut me out. Don't be dramatic, he scoffed. Nobody's cutting you out. You'll be essential to the operation. You'll be paid for your consulting work. It's a fair arrangement. A fair arrangement? Being paid a fee for the business I had conceived, nurtured, and built from the ground up, while my mother and brother owned and controlled it. It felt like a cruel joke. I argued with him, trying to appeal to his sense of fairness, to the initial promise of a family venture. He remained unmoved, repeating the same points about risk and control, occasionally throwing in phrases like business realities and protecting the family investment. I hung up the phone feeling numb. I immediately called my mother, hoping she would see the injustice of it, that Daniel had perhaps misunderstood something. But she echoed Daniel's points, softening them with maternal language, but the message was the same. Rebecca, darling, think of it this way, she said gently. We're just protecting you. Business can be so stressful, so complicated. This way, you don't have to worry about the liabilities, the legal headaches. You can just do what you're good at, the fun stuff, the vision. Daniel and I will handle the messy parts. It's for your own good, really. My own good, I repeated, tears welling up. It sounds like you're saying my contribution isn't worth ownership. That my work, my idea, my passion, isn't worth the same as putting up money. Oh, of course, it's valuable, she said quickly, perhaps hearing the distress in my voice. Invaluable.
You're the heart of it, darling.
But business is business. And legally, financially. Well, things are just simpler this way. It's just a technicality, really. A technicality. Stripping my name off the core legal framework of the business I created was a technicality. I felt a profound sense of disorientation, like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. The initial excitement, the shared dream, the feeling of finally belonging and being valued by my family, it all curdled into bitter disappointment and a dawning, horrifying understanding. This wasn't a partnership. It was a takeover. Over the next few days, the reality of the situation sunk in. I was locked out of certain documents, excluded from meetings with potential investors or suppliers that my mother and Daniel deemed too technical or too sensitive for a mere consultant. The brand I had painstakingly developed, the name I had chosen, the logo I had designed, they were now being used under a company name registered solely in their names. My identity, tied so closely to this venture, was being systematically erased from its official existence. The emotional impact was devastating. I felt betrayed on a level I hadn't thought possible. This wasn't a stranger stealing an idea. This was my family. The people who were supposed to support me, to have my back, were actively working to minimize my role and control my creation. I swung between waves of anger, hurt, and deep sadness. I questioned everything. Had I been stupid and naive? Had I misread their intentions from the start? Was I really as unimportant as the structure made me feel? The gaslighting continued. Whenever I tried to voice my feelings, my mother would become defensive or wounded. How can you say we're cutting you out? We're working ourselves to the bone for this. We're doing this for the family. Daniel would adopt his patronizing tone. Rebecca, we've been over this. This is just how business works. You're being emotional, My attempts to articulate the pain of having my contribution erased were met with accusations of ingratitude or being difficult. It was a classic manipulation tactic: turn the victim into the aggressor, deflect blame, and sow seeds of doubt. And it worked for a while. I started to question my own sanity, wondering if I was being overly sensitive, if I didn't understand the complexities of the business world. But the knot of injustice remained in my gut. I would lie awake at night, replaying conversations, remembering the initial excitement, the promises of a family venture. The contrast between what was said then and what was happening now was stark and undeniable. I looked at the business plan, the brand guidelines, the supplier research, all the work I had done. It was tangible proof of my contribution, proof that this was my idea, my vision. One morning, after a particularly sleepless night, something shifted. The deep well of hurt and self-doubt started to give way to a flicker of something else: quiet determination. I realized I couldn't fight their perception of reality. I couldn't force them to acknowledge my worth or their betrayal. Their narrative was set. But I could control my own actions. I could decide what I was willing to accept. And accepting being a sidelined consultant on my own life's work was no longer an option. The path forward wasn't immediately clear, but I knew I had to reclaim what was mine. The business name, the brand identity, the core concept, these were things I had created before I brought my family in. They were intrinsically linked to me. While my mother and Daniel had legally registered a company, they hadn't registered the brand. They were using the name I had invented, the logo I had designed, marketing my vision, but they hadn't protected these specific assets legally. This was the key. It was a loophole they hadn't considered, or perhaps thought I was too naive to notice. They had focused on the corporate structure and legal contracts related to operations and funding, but they had overlooked the importance of intellectual property registration. My determination solidified. I spent days researching trademark law, copyright, and business registration processes. I consulted with an independent lawyer, one who specialized in intellectual property. I didn't tell my family what I was doing. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reclaiming. This was setting a boundary, not just in words, but in concrete action. The process was painstaking. Gathering all the documentation, proving my prior use of the brand name and logo, outlining the unique aspects of the business concept that were my original creation. It was empowering, though, to put all the pieces together, to see on paper the undeniable evidence of my work, my vision, my ownership of the idea itself. It felt like piecing myself back together after being shattered. Finally, the day came. I filed the necessary paperwork to register the brand name and logo under a new entity, one completely separate from the company my mother and Daniel had created. I registered it in my name. It wasn't just a legal transaction. It was an act of defiance, a declaration of independence. It was me saying, "You cannot erase me. You cannot steal my identity and claim it as your own." The registration process took time, but eventually, I received confirmation. The brand was legally mine. I owned the name, the logo, the visual identity. My family was still operating their company, using the name and logo, completely unaware that I had quietly pulled the rug out from under the brand itself. I knew the confrontation was coming. I could have let them continue, waiting for the moment their use of the trademark would cause legal issues down the line. But I didn't want to prolong the agony, the deception. I needed to be upfront, to speak my truth, even if it shattered the fragile remnants of our family relationship. I called a meeting. I asked them to come to my apartment, a neutral territory that felt safer than their home or a shared office space. I prepared myself mentally, rehearsing what I would say, anticipating their reactions. I felt a mix of nerves and a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. They arrived, looking slightly confused. My mother smiled, though her eyes seemed wary. Daniel had his usual confident swagger. We sat down, and the air was thick with unspoken tension. "Thank you for coming," I started, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands hidden under the table. "Asked you here because we need to talk about the business, about the company." "Okay, Rebecca," my mother said, her tone overly sweet. "What about it? Is something wrong?" "Something has been wrong for a while now," I said, looking directly at them. Since you decided to exclude me from ownership and control. Since you reduced my role to a consultant on my own idea. Daniel leaned back, crossing his arms. Here we go, he muttered. Still going on about that? Yes, Daniel, I said, my voice gaining strength. Because it's important. It's about integrity. It's about respect. And it's about the truth of who created this business. I took a deep breath. When I brought this idea to you, I envisioned a family partnership. I trusted you. But you saw an opportunity to take control, to minimize my role, to benefit from my work while pushing me to the side. My mother interrupted, her voice rising. That's not fair, Rebecca. We've invested our time, our money. You invested in a structure that erased my name. I countered, cutting her off. You decided I wasn't worthy of being an owner, despite creating the core concept, the brand, the vision, and doing the foundational work. We handled the real business side. Daniel said, straightening up. The legal stuff, the money. And while you were focused on that, I said, pulling a document from the folder beside me, you overlooked something crucial. I slid the document across the table. It was the certificate of trademark registration. They picked it up, their faces initially showing confusion, then disbelief, and finally, shock and anger as they read it. What is this? Daniel demanded, his voice tight. It's the trademark registration for the brand name and logo, I said, a sense of quiet triumph mixing with the lingering pain. I registered it. In my name. I own the brand. My mother dropped the paper, as if it were hot. Her face paled, then flushed crimson. You did what? She shrieked. I protected my intellectual property, I stated calmly. The brand you've been using, marketing, building your company around? It belongs to me now. Legally. The room erupted. My mother launched into a tirade, accusing me of being malicious, ungrateful, and trying to ruin the family. Daniel was equally furious, calling me manipulative and underhanded. They couldn't believe I had acted independently, that I had anticipated their actions and taken steps to protect myself. They saw it not as a response to their betrayal, but as an unprovoked attack on them. How could you do this, Rebecca? My mother cried, her voice dripping with feigned hurt. After everything we've done for you, this is a betrayal of the family. A betrayal? I asked, my voice rising slightly. You want to talk about betrayal? What do you call taking someone's life's work, stripping their name off it, and telling them it's for their own good? We were trying to help you. Daniel yelled, slamming his hand on the table. Help me. I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. By pushing me out? By taking control? That's not help, Daniel. That's theft. The argument raged. They tried to negotiate, to backtrack, to offer me a larger consulting fee, even a small percentage of ownership, anything to get me to transfer the trademark to their company. But it was too late. Their actions had broken something fundamental. Their words now rang hollow, blatant attempts to regain control they had lost. It's not for sale, I said firmly, looking from one to the other. The brand is mine. I built it. I own it. You can't use the name or the logo anymore. You'll have to rebrand your company. The look on their faces was a mixture of fury and disbelief. They couldn't comprehend that I, the quiet, overlooked one, had finally drawn a line in the sand and enforced it so effectively. My mother started crying, real tears this time, though I suspected they were more from frustration and a sense of loss of control than genuine remorse. You're tearing the family apart, she wailed. No, I said, my voice tired but resolute. You did that. When you chose control and profit over trust and partnership. I'm just picking up the pieces and rebuilding them myself. They left my apartment that day in a storm of accusations and threats. It was the most dramatic confrontation we'd ever had, a raw, ugly explosion of years of unspoken resentment and manipulation. In the aftermath, the silence was deafening. There were angry texts and emails initially, mostly from Daniel, demanding I reconsider, threatening legal action, which, thanks to my lawyer, I knew was baseless regarding the trademark. I didn't respond to the threats. I only responded via my lawyer, reiterating my ownership of the brand and demanding they cease and desist using it. They eventually complied, forced to change their company name and branding. Watching them scramble to rebrand, seeing the frustration and inconvenience it caused them, brought a complex mix of emotions. There was a sense of vindication, yes. I had stood up for myself, and I had won. But there was also profound sadness. This wasn't just a business dispute. It was the end of a certain kind of relationship with my mother and brother. The family venture we had dreamed of, the opportunity to build something together, was dead, killed by their own actions. Building the business on my own was hard, incredibly hard. I had the brand, the vision, the ethical framework, and my expertise. But I didn't have their initial capital or their extensive network. I had to start almost from scratch on the operational side. There were moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I should have just accepted their offer, swallowed my pride, and stayed on as a consultant, however unfair it felt. But then I would remember the look on their faces when they saw the trademark certificate, the casual cruelty of their dismissal of my work, the constant feeling of being less than in their presence. And I knew I had made the right choice. My self-respect was worth more than any potential financial gain from being involved in their version of the business. I launched my business under the brand name I had fought for. It was a slower, more challenging start than it might have been with their resources, but every small success felt monumental. Every customer who connected with the brand's values, every supplier who appreciated my commitment to ethical practices, felt like validation. I was doing it my way, staying true to the mission, without compromising my values or my identity. The family dynamics shifted irrevocably. My mother and Daniel were distant, cold. Our conversations, when they happened at all, were strained and superficial, carefully avoiding any mention of our respective businesses. There were family gatherings I wasn't invited to, or ones I chose not to attend because the tension was unbearable. Some relatives, who had heard a skewed version of events from my mother and Daniel, were cool towards me, seeing me as the one who had caused conflict. Others, who knew me and had perhaps seen glimpses of my family's manipulative tendencies over the years, were quietly supportive, offering words of encouragement when they could. It was a lonely process, separating myself from the people who had been my closest relations. There was grieving involved, mourning the loss of the family I had wished for, the supportive unit I had believed we could be. But as the business grew, and as I built a network of genuine partners, suppliers, and customers who valued my integrity, I started to heal. I learned to trust my own judgment, to rely on my own strength, to validate myself instead of constantly seeking approval from others, especially from my family. The business is doing well now. It's not a multi-million-dollar corporation, and maybe it never will be. But it's mine. It's built on the principles I believe in, and it reflects my vision. And my name is front and center. It's on every package, every marketing material, every legal document. It's a constant reminder of what I overcame and what I built. My relationship with my mother and Daniel is minimal. We exchange perfunctory texts on holidays. There's no warmth, no closeness. The betrayal, the fight over the business, the fundamental lack of respect they showed for my work and my identity, it created a chasm that feels too wide to bridge. And perhaps, for my own well-being, it's better that way. I've learned that sometimes, protecting your peace and your sense of self means accepting that certain relationships, even family ones, cannot be what you want them to be. It was a painful lesson, one that cost me dearly in emotional terms. But it was also a lesson in resilience, in standing up for yourself, and in the power of owning your truth. They stripped my name off the contract, thinking they could take my dream and make it theirs. But in the end, I took my name and the dream and built something even stronger, something truly my own. So, that's my story. It's a story about family, business, betrayal, and ultimately, about finding your own voice and reclaiming your power. Navigating toxic dynamics, especially within your family, is incredibly difficult. It can make you question yourself, doubt your worth, and feel completely alone. But your experience is valid. Your feelings are real. And you have the right to protect yourself and everything you've built, whether it's a business, your reputation, or simply your peace of mind. I learned that setting boundaries isn't about punishing others. It's about preserving yourself. It's about saying, this is who I am, this is what I value, and this is what I will and will not accept. It's a process, and it's often painful, but it's essential for growth and healing. If you've been through anything similar, please share your experience in the comments below. Let's support each other. If this story resonated with you, if you understand the pain of betrayal or the struggle for validation, please hit that like button. It really does make a difference. And subscribe for more stories about overcoming challenges, setting boundaries, and finding your strength. Thank you for listening. Remember to speak your truth, always.